Well, for more on this story, I'm joined here in the studio by journalist and Syria analyst Kristin Helberg. Welcome to the show, Kristin. Trump says the so-called Islamic State has been defeated in Syria, at least. Can American troops now pull out of Syria and really say, job done?
Not really. I mean, ISIS, or the so-called Islamic State, is being cornered in Syrian, Iraqi border regions. There are almost 2,000 fighters maybe left. So this is the military strategic behind this that has been fulfilled. That's true. The majority of the leaders of ISIS have been killed. That's true. But ideologically, it's not defeated. It lives on in the heads of hundreds of thousands of young men who are not participating politically, who are being oppressed, who don't see any perspectives for themselves. So the US, what they have done is just they have been bombing ISIS out of Syria without even being ready to rebuild, for example, Raqqa, the so-called capital of ISIS. So people are living there in the rubbles with mines, and they have not taken responsibility even over the regions that they controlled. And this is the conditions that extremists need to rebuild a new extremist group. So it's just a question of time, I think, until we see a second ISIS.
Okay, so the U.S. is not there in Syria alone, of course, fighting IS. We're just starting to get some reactions in from European allies. The French Defense Minister, Florence Parly, had this to say: Islamic State are weaker than ever. They have gone into hiding and are fighting as insurgents. Islamic State have lost more than 90% of their territory. They don't have the logistics they once had. Okay, well, she continues, Islamic State have not been obliterated, nor have their roots. We must defeat the last pockets of this terrorist organization with military force. Now, that suggests that Donald Trump is alone, at least when it comes to its alliance with France in fighting IS there. What will happen when U.S. troops, if and when U.S. troops pull out of Syria? Will that not create a security vacuum?
Well, this vacuum will be filled by Turkey in the north. It will be filled by Iran in the east of Syria. Iran is very happy to complete its land corridor for weapons transportation from Iran through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon to its ally Hezbollah. And it will be filled by, obviously, the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, who installs a kind of graveyard peace for people. You know, you can surrender to his rule. But this is not to be mistaken for stability. So no vacuum, because everybody else will step in and fill it.
Right. Yeah, the vacuum will certainly be filled. There are enough interests there, people battling there. In 2003, George W. Bush in the U.S., he declared major combat operations to be finished in Iraq. In 2011, President Obama announced the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. Both were criticized for doing so prematurely. Do you see parallels to Trump's announcement concerning Syria?
I see one big parallel, which is that the U.S. always tends to step out of its engagement without really making sure what comes afterwards. But there's a big, big difference here, because in Syria, it's not about the power struggle inside the country. It's not about regime change. The U.S. went to Afghanistan, they went to Iraq to change the ruling regime there. This is not the case in Syria. The U.S. went to Syria to fight IS and now to contain Iran. So this is regional, strategic purposes and not regime change in Damascus.
It's a complex proxy war there in Syria, as we know. The U.S. has relied heavily on Kurdish forces to fight Islamic State. That's always been a thorn in Turkey's side, which regards the Kurds as terrorists. Is the news from Washington a green light for Turkey to now move against the Kurds?
I think so. And this is the big catastrophe for the Kurdish forces, for the SDF, because for them, the U.S. military presence was the only guarantee that President Erdogan would not start his major offensive that is being underway on the border already. And I mean, we are talking about 1/3 of the Syrian territory that is quite stable. It's not a democratic rule of this Kurdish party there, but it has spawned, or it has made sure that this region was not majorly destroyed by Russian Air Force, by the Syrian Air Force. So it was a good deal for the last few years. Now, if the Turkish offensive starts, this really risks a major destabilization of this whole northeastern area of Syria. And the Kurds very much feel betrayed again, historically. This is something that tends to repeat itself by the West. So we've made them, you know, our partners in fighting ISIS for the West as well. And now we are letting them down again in this very critical moment.
Kristin, thank you so much. Journalist and Syria analyst Kristin Helberg.
Thank you.